Caryne, welcome to the show. Give us your first insight.
Great. So I certainly want to, as I think about our current, macro economy right now, it's slowing down, and companies are just being a little bit more earnest in pursuing profits above all else. Leaders are often trying to cut staff, right? Marketing tends to be one of the first functions to get hit, but I think there are certainly serious consequences to that. But what I want to share is, what can we do as an organization now to really align ourselves to those new aggressive objectives. So if you have a couple of things that I want to share, if you have to adjust budgets here, we want to make sure that we are protecting a lot of our expenses to engaging our customers and potential customers during this time, because a lot of successful go-to-market teams, our focus really is to help guide customers through a lot of these tough times, right? We're not here to, because our budgets are cut, doesn't mean that we stop marketing to them. So make sure that we are continuously engaging them. A couple of low-hanging fruit action items that I can share. Some of the things that we can start doing now is to adjust our positioning. How do we actually tailor our messaging now to reflect on our customer sentiment, right? How do we be more sensitive to things like cost sensitivity, productivity needs, which are top of mind for a lot of business. So that's certainly one thing that we can adapt our positioning, our messaging to. Sorry
if I can cut you off there. So how, practically speaking, would a company, let's just say you're a company that was doing really well, maybe you're a venture-backed startup, so you had raised a bunch of money, and now you're hitting on some tough times, customer purchasing is slowing down. How do you prioritize marketing? Do you cut anything off? And if so, what?
Yeah, so budgets are naturally going to be cut, and I would consider cutting anything that's focused on top funnel marketing, right? Anything that's targeted at long sales cycle, complex sales cycle. Now it's really the time to focus more on qualified opportunities, opportunities that have higher win rates, shorter sales cycles. So I come from an ABM world, account-based marketing. And I would say that's really how marketing and sales should really be running their targeting anyway. It's very crisp, it's very focused. You know exactly who you're going after, and you know exactly what you want to say to them. So no more broad brush marketing. Let's go after everyone and see what sticks. So I would say, be crystal clear, no more top funnel marketing, forget about the ones with long sales cycles and low win rates, and work very closely with sales too. You want to identify, you want to really understand what that sales process is like. What are some of the stall points in our buying processes? How do we actually start focusing on content and educational materials, sales enablement that's going to help our customers make buying decisions, right, along that journey. So, no matter how micro it is, right, you want to make sure that, our sales team is talking about the right things to make that sale.
So cut out, when you say top of funnel, you mean creating awareness among people who have, let's say, never heard of your product, never indicated interest in your product. You want to cut out that sort of marketing and focus on people that have some indication of interest, whether maybe they entered their email address or they attended a webinar or an event or something in that respect. Is that what you mean?
Yes, exactly. Right. So I wouldn't say cut it off completely, because that could be dangerous too, as you think through the process. Over time, when demand picks up again, you want to, be ready to capture on that demand. But, I think this is a time where we want to orientate towards more qualified opportunities instead. How do we really help those potential buyers to get through the sales cycle more easily with us? How do we make it easy for them to work with us?
And how do you mentioned putting marketing alongside sales. That's really interesting, because I feel like at a lot of companies, they work almost behind silos. They each do their own thing. What's the best way for marketing folks to engage sales and vice versa for sales folks to engage marketing?
Yeah. I feel like this, when I think about revenue, I think of it as a team sport, right? There's no sales, there's no marketing. It's everybody in the company, getting involved. And there's only that one path to revenue. So this, now more than ever is the time for marketing to get more involved in, in understanding what pipeline looks like, what that one North Star is, what that revenue number is, and, and orientate themselves in that game. What can marketing do now to not just build top funnel, but to really move customers from, well, I just heard of you, I don't quite know what you're doing, to, oh, wow, I see value in what you're doing now. I want to have a conversation with you, right? So work with sales to really map out that buying journey, that sales cycle, and work with sales to really look at roles and responsibilities along that sales cycle, right? Marketing, we're going to be responsible for bringing in these qualified accounts. We will, this is how we are going to speak to them. When we pass those opportunities over to you, they would have already known A, B, C, D about us, and your job is to pick up from there and drive conversations through. They will be going through consideration stage with you. So what would you need from us to really facilitate those conversations and accelerate those opportunities to paying customers? So really understand that game plan from end to end.
It seems like a lot of your experience is in B2B. So B2B marketing versus B2C marketing, can you speak to how you might approach things differently? And let's just say, again, you're a venture-backed startup, so you're looking for high growth. How might you think about it differently now if you're selling, let's say, a low-cost consumer product versus you're trying to win a $100,000 account?
Yeah, great question. I think the major difference between B2B and B2C really is the fact that within B2B, there are just more people in the buying committee. There is a buying committee behind that purchase decision, right? Within B2C, you're likely talking to one or two, potentially at most, I would say. But even then, within B2B, there are micro SMBs too, where, sales cycles are so much quicker, they're shorter, they're more transactional. And, what remains fundamental and what doesn't change is the fact that, you need to show value. You need to know exactly who your customer is. You need to know how to engage them, how to show value to them, right? Regardless of whether you're in B2C or B2B. So there are two things, right? Know your product, know exactly what you're selling, know what your value is, and know your customer, and have a plan to connect the two.
And is there a way, because you're totally right, there's more of a buying committee on a business purchase. Obviously, a consumer purchase is just one person making a decision, sometimes impulsively. What about timeframes? So, when we talk about speeding up the sales process because you want to, let's say, get people to buy sooner than later because of a tougher economic climate, is there any way to push a business purchase in the same way that you can with a consumer purchase?
So yes, there's certainly in B2B, we're always looking to shorten the sales cycle. And one of the key ways to doing that is to simplify your messaging. Think about a sales deck, for example. We don't want 30 slides in a sales deck, right? How do we actually pitch and deliver value, position ourselves and deliver value in 15 minutes? And get them to, make that micro decision. They don't exactly have to buy now. That would be the ideal. But how do we get them to, to move closer to that buying decision? So we do need to map out that game plan, that journey, that sales cycle, so to speak, right? In a B2B environment, because there are multiple stakeholders, we need to know each and every stakeholder, how they make decisions, and how individually, and how they make decisions collectively as a committee. So this is where, again, you get into the buyer personas. What are the objectives? What are the needs? And ultimately, we are all human. A lot of our objectives and needs are tied to our own personal success, right? So your job, whether you're in B2B or B2C, is to make them look good. How are you doing that? How do you add value? So, I would say, shortening sales cycle, whether it's B2C or B2B, it's really about, making them feel good about themselves. What is their life? What would that better life look like with you on board, as a co-pilot?
Yeah, there's two things you said there that really stuck out. Number one, I think people get lost in more is better and bigger decks, and let's make this slide deck 40 pages instead of 10 pages. And at the end of the day, you don't get bonus points for difficulty. It doesn't, just because it's harder doesn't mean it's better. And it's oftentimes that you bury the message and people just they don't want to deal with you. They'd rather have a simpler solution. Exactly. The other thing is you move them along faster so that you can actually push people. Maybe they're not going to make a purchase the same day, but they'll at least give an intent signal, like we'll have another meeting or we'll bring this person into the fold. The vice president will come in. The other thing that you mentioned there is, I think that people miss, is that the people who are making the decision at the end of the day are just people. So how are you going to make their job better? Are you going to let them hit their KPIs faster? Are you going to help them
Yeah,
get that next promotion? Are you going to help them look good to their boss? And so thinking about the psychology of who am I selling this to, it's very different if you're selling to
exactly.
a CMO versus a VP versus a marketing manager versus an intern. It's a whole different cycle.
Exactly. And I would take it one step further, right? Beyond business KPIs, it's also personal motivations. Truly understand where they want to get to in their lives. For example, I sell into a lot of sales and marketing functions. When I sell digital tools, for example, like people don't want to stay in the jobs as marketing managers forever, right? The goal is to move from manager to VP to CMO one day. So what is your plan to help them get there? How do you appeal to their personal motivations? I think ultimately when we sell to people, you have to recognize people's personal motivations as part of that game plan.
Absolutely. Anything else? I noticed on your LinkedIn, you've got brand and demand generation. How do you think about doing sort of brand awareness work versus demand generation work? Are those sometimes sort of contradictory to each other, or can they work in tandem?
They would certainly work in tandem. So the reason why I think there was a time when there was so much focus on demand gen, performance, numbers, and I think there certainly is a place for that in marketing. But ultimately, if people don't know you, if there's no affinity, you're not going to get your number. And this is where brand is critical. How do we actually leverage our personality, our brand identity, our brand strategy to grow a very healthy, a very rich territory for prospecting, for relationship building? How do we build that affinity so that when you start building your demand, there's something for you to prospect into, right? So I would think of it as a funnel, brand being top funnel, and it's key for the long term, right? And demand coming in to really create intent. And there are various pieces to the demand engine too. There's demand creation, there's demand capture, and then there's also sales acceleration. But that's one piece of the engine where it becomes very, very performance-based, if you like. But that's not going to happen without the qualitative, aspect to it, the brand piece to it.
Interesting. And then one last note on that. Do you think there are any vehicles? So here we are in early 2023. Where are you putting most of your attention? I mean, there's TikTok and LinkedIn. There's podcasts. There's ways to build demand across, obviously, Facebook, Google. What is it?
So many of them, I can't keep
Yeah.
up. Yeah. And I would say, I think these channels are just going to expand over time. There's also the metaverse, the Web3. But what's most important is, before we get too carried away with all these tactics, is back to knowing your customer. Are they, what channels are they on? Where do they tend to commune? Where do they, gather? Where do you need to be part of the conversations they're having already? And so, use that to guide your strategy. Use that to guide the way you want to talk to them, and where you want to talk to them, where you want to distribute your strategy, your messages. So, for example, in B2B, at one point, TikTok was not necessarily a key channel for us, but over time, right, it has become a key channel. And so we cannot ignore that. Now, everyone is talking about Web3. Should I start putting my marketing on Web3? That's subjective. That depends on whether your customers are there. So I would say, definitely keep an eye on how the market is playing out, but at the same time, be specific and crisp on where your target audience is. If you have the time, if you have the money, certainly you want to be everywhere. That's great. That's ideal. But I don't think this is time for us to want to be everywhere. Again, it's back to staying very focused.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. People think, oh well, if it exists, I should be there. And ultimately, if you have the money, sure, put it into there. But ultimately, if you actually measure your channels, you will see probably 70 or 80% is coming from one or two of the things you're doing. So if you need to prioritize, that's where you do it.
Yeah. And on the flip side too, I know there are a lot of traditional channels like PPC and paid social and what have you, but sometimes these are not necessarily the most profitable channels for you if your market is not there, right? We know, for example, that PPC takes 6 months to bear fruit. And if you need revenues right now, there may be better ways to get to your target audience than tend to focus on PPC. That could potentially be the long game, But if you're thinking of the now, I can think of a million other ways to reach them.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, Caryne, this was great. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Awesome. Okay.